Hello again, everyone. It's Andy here looking at the markets. This is Andy with Garcia Research. Just trading these currency markets, of course, getting ready for the London market open. Just currently looking across the board. Not really seeing much to begin with. Of course, a little bit of a continuation rally compared to what we were looking at yesterday. As it stands, the markets do look like they're kind of quiet. That's just the nature of things when it comes to the start of the trading session out in London. Actually, let me strike that and talk about the looks like the Kiwi and the Australian dollar are actually the ones that are getting smacked this morning. The Australian dollar really not taking a beating as much as, say, for instance, the New Zealand dollar. You got the Kiwi is down almost 1% on the day. So that's actually what we're looking at for the moment. Yeah, the Japanese yen not really trading very much for the day. Dollar index futures basically flat on the day as well. So we'll keep an eye on what's happening here. When we take a look here at the charts, that's the bottom line is what we're taking a look at is this chart right here. You can see how the move today has been off of this resistance zone. You could tell that there was going to be some selling here. So now we're looking for a setup to see if this market could actually continue down into the 64 area. Be on alert that any kind of a pullback into the 4-hour pyramid, the moving averages, is going to be a nice little setup there for the Kiwi. So this right here is my intraday type of chart, and what I'm looking for here, first of all, I want to see if this if I could get these moving averages to actually start to roll over, that'd be good for the Kiwi. See, right now you have the 50 on the 60 above the 50 on the 240, and that still is rather bullish. So at this point you could get something like this where the market trades lower but ultimately actually does move higher. So I'm not really buying the idea that the market is going lower just yet. I have a feeling that this is just a washout, but we will we'll play it as it comes. Just getting set up here for the moment. Taking a look at the pound here. Pound looks like it's ready to move above the 50 on the daily. Euro, the euro is flat as well, but we were getting over the past hour a little bit of a push off the moving averages here. Okay, let me gotta mess with the chart here. See if this will actually, I guess I'm gonna have to try this again here in a minute. Euro yen back above 130. Okay, I'll try that here in a minute. Let's see if I can. Again, the dollar itself has been rather flat, so don't want to get overly excited about one way or the other.
minute to go until the start of cash trading this Thursday morning. What have we got going on for you? Euro dollar kind of flattish right now. There is action in the foreign exchange markets. It's in emerging markets and it's in the Aussie and the Kiwi. Just remember though, we're about to get Saxony inflation data out of Germany. The main German number comes just after lunchtime today. We're also looking at an Italian auction today. So both of those two factors could be worth paying attention to over the next couple of hours. Euro dollar trading 117.02. Chinese markets were softer overnight. We're down around a percent going into the close. Oil's just catching a bit as we speak, 77.71. And the S&P yesterday grinding out. The records just continue to be made. The S&P yesterday up by another 0.6%. What are we looking at in futures today? A mildly negative start of the day. Corporate news a little thin on the ground. There are a few ex-dividends that we're paying attention to. But trade continues to dominate. The yen story continues to dominate. But the dollar remains the dominant theme. Right, here we go. Europe Thursday morning, 75.63 is where London.
Looks like we got the European Open underway.
You'll see much movement today. Maybe a little bit of negativity coming in. But again, there are a few ex-dividend stocks that are worth paying attention to. St. James is going ex-dividend. There's
again, really not looking at anything other than the Japanese or the New Zealand dollar right now. So that should be catching your attention. It looks like we're starting to put in a low right now. So let's see if we can actually spot that. Looks like.
Yeah, we're looking at a lot of sectors that are down this morning, understandably. Take a look at the IMAP, it's mostly red there. We can see financials are down, consumer discretionary stocks are down, energy is taking a hit today, which is interesting because if you look at oil prices, they're not huge moves, but they're pretty high right now with NYMEX crude trading at almost $70 a barrel. In any case, the green spaces are few and far between in a day that's going to see most groups this morning fall down. Guy?
Yep, let's just take a look at what's happening on the MRR this morning. Anne-Marie was bringing us the story surrounding Bouygues. That stock is jumping a little bit this morning. So we are seeing Bouygues having a very solid session out of France, which is going to help the French market maybe once again outperform. Bellway, Capita, BDG out of the UK, all trading higher, as well as electric components having a very solid day as well. Let's take you down to the bottom end of the market though. Electa is down out of Sweden. IWG out of the UK. That's an interesting business model competition story at the moment in that space. It's trading a little softer as well. I just want to check that actually hasn't gone ex-dividend. I can't see anything there. Hammerson has though gone ex-dividend this morning. Let me just give you the list of the stocks that are going ex-dividend. Auto Trader, I think you've got Capital and Counties going ex-dividend. I think you've got Hammerson going ex-dividend. Intercontinental Hotels.
Just got my eye on the dollar index to see if it'll actually fall through.
This morning, Matt.
Fall through this support level that we were watching from yesterday.
After the gains that we saw in Asia evaporated in the afternoon session, despite another record from U.S. equities. Joining us now here in the studio in Berlin is Maximilian Kunkel. He's the CIO for Germany at UBS Global Wealth Management. And Max, first of all, thanks for coming in. Appreciate your time this morning. Let's talk about the U.S. stock record that I just mentioned. We haven't seen huge gains this year, but we are looking at an S&P 500 that's up, well, I guess 19%. Is that the only game in town? I mean, are you seeing more people diversifying less and focusing more on just this one asset?
Certainly what we've seen year to date is an extreme outperformance of the US equity market versus pretty much every single other area in the world. It's largely due to the growth differential, which has opened up year to date, both on a macro as well as on a microeconomic level. That outperformance has been extreme, and we also think that more likely than not it's not going to last. But clearly in the very short term, we would think that US equities will continue to move higher here, specifically also because
nice push here in the euro going over the last couple hours. You got a nice bounce out the EMAs here on the hourly chart. This is what I'm talking about. Good stuff, good stuff.
diversification within it. They've got equity diversification around the world. They've got some Japan, they've got some Europe, they've got some United States. And they're just sitting there looking at their statements, and we're about to get month-end statements again. And the US is just going to outperform once again by a significant degree. How do you, does that mean reverse at some point? What do you do with that?
It's more likely than not going to revert at some point, but what you really need for other markets, particularly emerging markets in Europe, to catch up is, on the one hand, clarity on trade, second, weakness in the US dollar, a more sustainable weakness in the US dollar, and lastly, and that's of particular importance for the European market, given the structural overweight in financials, higher interest rates in Europe.
Well, let's talk for a moment about technology, because we have a great story showing how much the market is short the big tech names. And I've got quite a cool screen here that Hillary put together for us, which shows the number of members trading above their 200-day moving average on in percentage terms. The S&P 500 here in blue, the NASDAQ in white. Why do you think the market is so short these stocks that had really been the engine for the broader rally that the broader bull market, I should say, that we've seen over the past 9 years?
I think this chart illustrates very much also our thinking, because ultimately what we've done, for example, a little before that gap opened, was after 9 years of being overweight US tech, we've neutralized our position. At the time when we went overweight, we said this was secular growth at a discount, and what we found at the beginning of the year was this was still secular growth, but no longer at a discount, and actually market breadth should widen out from here. So this makes perfect sense to us, and is likely going to continue. It's also very good actually for the overall market, because we had a lot of clients saying at the beginning of the year, gosh, market breadth is narrowing and this is only about tech ultimately. And what we're now starting to see is this broadening out, which is good for the sustainability of this rally on an overall index level.
Pound New Zealand. Looks like the pound New Zealand is up almost 1%. Euro New Zealand up 1%. These are good markets to be trading. Except look at that, you have the pound New Zealand right at a breakout point, just about ready to break out of this upper trend line. If you get a nice little push there, that's going to set up for a pretty good move to the upside. So watching for the breakout here.
So what's abnormal, I guess, when we're talking about monetary policy, we're still in the very early stages of monetary policy.
You're in New Zealand above the breakout point here, but pushing into this 88.9 level. So this 88.9 level is actually the Fibonacci for this down move. You got this high over here, down to this low, and then a push up. Okay, so going sideways here and now breaking out over here, hitting that 88.9 level. So you got to be on alert here for the turnaround in the Euro New Zealand. It doesn't look like that's going to happen though, considering the market is on a rip. Got the dollar about ready to take out the lows.
We have some headlines coming out of the Johannesburg market. We talked about this through the morning already. MTN is facing this big call from Nigeria that is going to repatriate money. The Nigerians are ordering circa 8% billion-dollar refund.
Look at that, New Zealand Swiss franc on the lows again.
Is really suffering on the back of this. I think at one point it was down 18%. It's now down 16%.
Looks like the pound yen got a nice rip too. We were watching this for a nice little move, and here we are, pushing above the 50 on the daily. Any kind of a move down into 144, 143 is going to be a nice buying opportunity. You got 143.67 as a breakout point, so that's going to be a place to look for a retest.
This after again 120,000 mobile customers in Q2. That's next. This is Bloomberg. minutes into the session. European equity markets, to be honest, going nowhere fast, but there's some really interesting stock stories that are worth focusing on. Let's find out what's going on. Here's Anne-Marie Horton.
Good morning, guys. Bouygues, one of the biggest gainers in the stock 600, up 4 3/10%. They were out with earnings today, and they beat those numbers. They also confirmed their outlook. In their mobile unit, they added customers, which is pretty big deal considering they are the smallest French mobile company. So those numbers could be adding to the stock gains this morning. Danske Bank down 0.4%. The U.S. Treasury Department is, quote, very closely monitoring allegations of money laundering against the bank. This is according to a local Danish newspaper. Under some pressure there. And Vodafone to the downside, down 1 2/10%. This says is downgraded by Bank of America. They're citing competition from the likes of Italy and Spain, as well as citing the depreciation of the Turkish lira. Got it, Matt?
All right, Anne-Marie, thanks very much. Now, President Donald Trump has said talks with Canada to overhaul the North American Free Trade Agreement are going well, expressing optimism the two countries could reach a deal this week.
Negotiating with them right now, and they want to be a part of the deal. And we gave till Friday, and I think we're probably on track. We'll see what happens, but in any event, things are working out very well.
Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government is trying to reach agreement with the U.S. this week, but he added that Canada won't sacrifice its goal of getting the right deal. Joining us now from Hong Kong is Bloomberg Senior International Editor Jody Schneider. Jody, the talks with Canada, what are the main issues being hashed out? Is this all about milk?
It's partly about milk, yes. That's obviously a huge part. Dairy products are a huge part of the Canadian economy, and that's part of it. But also part of it is the insistence of Prime Minister Trudeau and people in his party that there be language in the bill, in the agreement, and there's this language now in NAFTA that basically sets up panels to consider anti-dumping cases, so arbitration panels. It sounds a little wonky, and it's actually come up some in Brexit too, but this is really something they're insisting on, and they're saying if they don't get this, if this doesn't happen, they can't sign a deal. So it really will be who blinks, the U.S. or Canada, perhaps over this particular provision.
Jody, we've got this Friday deadline. What happens if we go past it? What happens if we don't get a deal? What happens if talks don't go well?
Yeah, this is a deadline that the U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and President Trump have imposed, saying they want to bring this to the U.S. Congress by Friday.
Nice move in the euro now.
If it doesn't happen,
Keep an eye on that euro. Put new highs in the day. You got the dollar in the. If I could get this dollar to move below the previous low, that'll actually help. You can see that the euro right now is actually starting to push to the highs of this consolidation zone. This is what I want to see. My target right now is 119 and change here in the euro. Okay, so based on this breakout point, or based on this pattern that we're looking at, you got this reverse head and shoulders pattern. Looking for this market to actually reach up to somewhere around 1960. So just continue to be patient on that.
Further isolates the U.S., further isolates North American trade?
I don't think so. Ultimately, what we are seeing at the moment is clearly a move towards more regional trade agreements, unfortunately, and moving away more and more from global trade agreements. But a complete isolation would be too extreme in our view.
What impact does it have on Europe? Europe kind of feels like it's getting caught in the middle of all of this.
So it does have an impact on Europe, but I guess first of all we shouldn't forget that ultimately what Mr. Trump wants to focus on is what's close by. This is on the one hand, of course, Mexico and Canada, and on the other hand, what's very important is the relationship with China. Europe and also other areas are not of that great importance when it comes to trade. Europe gets caught in the middle, obviously, and we also see that, for example, European growth is likely going to come down from what we had previously expected, largely due to further weakness that we could see with regards to the China growth story as well as also the US not growing as fast as we had previously expected if trade tensions continue.
I'm looking at a chart of German car makers, and this just is a year-to-date price chart that shows it's been a rough year for all of them. And we know when you look at the stock 600 that automakers, you know, not just German, have had a tough time. Are they going to benefit or lose out from this trade deal? Is this going to affect the way German car makers trade? Because every time we hear something about a new NAFTA, we see moves in these stocks.
So I think the first thing we have to think about here is this only about trade or maybe something else? And I would say it's not only about trade, it's certainly also about matters regarding emissions, for example, in Germany, which have had a great deal of an impact also on the relative performance of the auto sector. But still, when we're thinking about trade, yes, of course it does have an impact. If you're looking at German automakers, for example, and the amount of cars that are actually produced in Germany is only 34%. The rest is being produced largely in China, but also in the US and other parts of the world. So anything that is happening over there is clearly impacting them.
By the way, Hillary is our chart master here. She's in charge of all the charts. And she's on my case all the time about colors. She has specific colors that we have to use all the time, but I change them a little bit when I'm talking about cars, Hillary, because I have to make Mercedes silver. That's kind of like their color. The same is true of BMW, right? The Bavarian blue. And then for Volkswagen, such a big group, the only thing I come up with was kind of a pink, a fuchsia there. But just to explain, sometimes these colors actually correlate to very important, racing history. Guy?
She's I think I can just about see her. I think she's standing up and like shouting at the screen, I think, as you try and mess with her models. Max is going to stay with us. Maximilian Cook, the CIO for Germany at UBS Global Wealth Management. He's going to stick around. Up next, Lemaire says France and Germany will work together for a stronger, more independent Europe. But does Berlin agree? Front page of the Financial Times this morning. Berlin not on the same page as Paris when it comes to the future of Europe. We'll discuss that next. This is Bloomberg.
Wonder if the Kiwi dollar is putting in the lows for the day. Looks like the dollar is having a little bit of a push. USD CAD, USD Swiss franc on the lows, or at least looking like they're gonna make new lows. USD CAD is making a fresh push off the 50 on the 60.
This is the European Open. Just quickly looking at the world map, you can see there's really not much going on.
You can see here, just making a nice push off the 50 on the 60. So looks like we're pushing right into support. So I guess that does make it unappealing at this point. I think I'd rather wait for it to get down below the 50 on the looks like that's the weekly chart.
Today isn't the day to look for big moves in European equity indexes. We do want to talk about Europe, Guy.
We always want to talk about Europe. How should investors? I know. The politics, though, continues to dominate, Matt. What is happening here? It's amazing. We talk about what is happening in Italy a great deal. We are going to spend increasing amounts of time talking about Brexit, I suspect, over the next 3 months as it actually starts to get quite interesting. And we've got the German finance minister who's currently on his feet, Olaf Scholz.
Trying to get this euro chart to come back up. It's not really cooperating at the point. At this point.
On the transformation of the financial industry. I'm sure they're going to be headlines breaking, but he's currently speaking. It's interesting because there is this kind of tension that it seems to be growing between the Germans and the French. In an exclusive interview, Bloomberg spoke to the French finance minister, Bruno Le Maire. He told us of the need for his country to work closely with Germany.
We are fighting for an independent Europe. An independent Europe means that you need to have independent financial tools so that European countries will be able to make trade with whatever country they have decided to choose. And that's exactly what we want to build. It's difficult. It will take time. We're thinking about new solutions. But I'm deeply convinced that at the end, hand in hand, France and Germany, we will build a stronger Europe, an independent one, one that we will be able to face the difficult times that we are facing now. All together, we are stronger. France and Germany and all the 27 member states, when we are together, we are stronger and we are independent.
Bruno Le Maire, the French finance minister. I'm looking at the front page of the FT website this morning, the international edition. Germany cools on Macron's Eurozone budget proposal. Feels a little different, doesn't it? Maximilian Kuckel, CIO for Germany at UBS Global Wealth Management, still with Matt over in Berlin. Maximilian, are Germany and France on the same page?
I think they're probably more on the same page than other members of the European Union, as well as the Eurozone in broad terms. So yes, we do think actually they're in a negotiation phase trying to pull things together, but also collaborating rather than trying to confront each other, which is obviously what some other members of the Eurozone are at the moment doing.
Speaking of those other members of the Eurozone, I've got the Italy-Germany 10-year spread here, and it looks dramatic, I think, from the chart. Now we're up to almost 300 basis point spread. Should investors be worried, or does this present an opportunity for that return that we're always chasing?
Well, we've seen actually from quite a few clients that have to invest in European sovereign bonds, as they've been seeing this rather as a buying opportunity than anything else. But this clearly reflects, obviously, the very confrontational stance that we are likely going to continue to see also from this newly formed government in Italy. Don't forget, if you're looking, for example, at past experiences such as what we had in Greece, that populist parties tend to first gain more domestic support in case they are more confrontational. And this is exactly what we're seeing in Italy at the moment. We are likely going to see this easing over time, and this is also why, particularly also thinking about continued ECB support, some clients see this rather as a buying opportunity.
And how much of a parallel can you make between Greece and Italy? I mean, Greece surely is the Lehman Brothers of the troubled European peripherals. We've learned our lesson. We're not going to let them get that close to failure again. Also, there's a different scale in terms of the problems.
I wouldn't make any comparison other than the political element that I just mentioned on how populists act specifically in such cases.
Guy?
Maximilian, how does Europe proceed in an environment where it is 3 years behind the United States? It is going to struggle to raise interest rates. It is an economy that is held together by extraordinary monetary stimulus being generated out of the ECB. Is Europe working?
So Europe has, and the Eurozone as such, has major fundamental problems. You're thinking about not a fully functioning banking union, there's no fiscal union, labour is clearly not as flexible as capital, for example, and then on the other hand you also have an ECB which is obviously setting rates for very diverse member states, put it like this. But then on the other hand, what we're also seeing at the moment is that Europe is growing quite nicely above trend. So for example, if you're looking at Eurozone growth potential, about 1.5%, we're still growing above that.
No, I was just going to say, we have this chart we can talk about on the other side of this break as well, that just shows European valuations are so much lower than the U.S. Maximilian Kunkel stays with us. And the Kiwi take a beating as very weak data raises the chances of their central bank staying on hold for a very long time. And the peso is pounded. President Macri surprises the markets and his people with news that Argentina needs money from its $50 billion IMF credit line as soon as possible. Plus, it's not just Argentina. The Turkish lira and the Indian rupee both slide sharply against the dollar. Good morning and welcome to Bloomberg Markets, the European Open. I'm Matt Miller here in Berlin alongside Guy Johnson at our European headquarters in London for what feels like, Guy, a very special FX edition of the European Market Open.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a struggle today, isn't it? The corporate news is there. It's not. We're kind of back end of August. Things are going to get exciting, I suspect, as we move our way into September. There are some corporate stories that are standing out. Are they worthy of headlines? Bouygues is up nearly 5% this morning on better consumer numbers. It's moving the stock to the upside. Eiffage is trading higher. Bellway's trading a little higher out of the UK. Vinci's picking up a little bit. But as you've already indicated, from an equity market point of view, we're going nowhere in a hurry today. I think the market is down kind of 2, 3, maybe even 4/10 of 1%. Let's talk about.
Looks like you're getting a little bounce in the euro and the dollar, so gotta be careful. Still holding above the that low.
The unwind there is having effects. There is a kind of portfolio effect that is spreading out from GAM that is worth paying attention to.
Got this support level that we've been watching. Need to go below this support level.
The numbers are a little bit mixed this morning versus guidance. Guidance is kind of staying where it is at the moment. The market's not wild about that. Iliad's trading a little softer as well, down 4.8%. So let's get the Bloomberg First World News update. Here's Sebastian Sala.
Guy Matt, US President Donald Trump has said talks with Canada to overhaul NAFTA are going well, expressing optimism the two countries could reach a deal this week. Earlier, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his government is trying to meet the same deadline. At the same time, his foreign minister signaled that talks are progressing well.
I feel that both parties are coming to this stage of the negotiation with a lot of goodwill. Certainly that is what Canada is bringing to the table. We understand each other's positions and what both sides need very, very well.
Donald Trump has accused China of undermining US efforts to pressure North Korea into giving up its nuclear weapons, indicating his trade war with Beijing is starting to exacerbate geopolitical tensions. The US president last week called off a trip to North Korea by Secretary of State Michael Pompeo, saying there hadn't been enough progress in talks aimed at denuclearizing the Korean peninsula, and that he would probably return after US trade disputes with China were resolved. The UK government has told the European Union it must compromise on its opposition to Prime Minister Theresa May's plans or risk a no-deal Brexit. Even so, the pound rallied to its highest level for 3 weeks yesterday, despite minimal evidence of any thaw in the frozen Brexit negotiations. At the same time, France's finance minister said Britain couldn't have its cake and eat it as it quits the EU. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg. Matt, Guy.
So much cake. I wonder what Brexit cake actually tastes like. I think that's something that's worth debating a little bit. Let's turn our attention back to the emerging markets. It's been something of a sell-off during the month of August. The peso down 7.3% to a record low after the IMF said it will consider Argentina's call to speed up disbursements from a $50 billion credit line. The request made by President Macri, that televised address, kind of took the traders, and to be honest, I think it cooked the country a little bit on sort of on the whole, to be honest. Shruti Sivabalan, Bloomberg's emerging markets reporter, joins us now. Did it catch everybody by surprise? Could it get worse from here?
Yes, it could really get worse.
Just having some technical issues here with the euro chart. Trying to figure that out on the side.
What happened really was that Macri tried to pass this off as a sign of improvement or confidence, but the market took it as a sign of desperation and an attempt to delay the inevitable fiscal pruning that the government has to engage in. So it sent the exact opposite message that Macri was hoping to send, and you know, the correlation between Argentina and the rest of emerging markets is very low, which kind of suggests that Argentina is getting isolated and being targeted for a sell-off. So things could get really ugly now.
You know, I would ask what it's going to take for a country like Argentina or Turkey to restore confidence in their currencies, but the list is long, and I'm guessing a lot of it is just going to be time, right?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of promises have been made both in Turkey and Argentina, and now it's time to see some action, particularly on the fiscal front. The problem in both these countries has gone beyond monetary policy. Now the focus is on fiscal policy. They need to cut spending, they need to raise revenue, and bring balance to the government finances, which neither government is ready to do. The dichotomy between a hawkish monetary policy and this tendency to promote growth with looser credit and so on from the government has kind of created this structural imbalance, which is not going to go away very soon, but at least the market wants to see some political willingness to act. But neither country is showing that, and that is going to be the breakthrough that the markets are waiting for.
Can we talk a little bit about the Indian rupee, which is just, the chart's quite amazing.
Yes.
It's a very aggressive move,
Yes.
and it just continues. How much of this is about the kind of the broader EM story? How much of this is something that the central bank can control, the government control through intervention? Just give us it's not something we talk about a lot, but maybe we should talk about it more. It's a massive economy.
Yes.
It's a huge number of people that get affected by this. What's going on, and are the authorities kind of comfortable with what's going on at the moment?
Yes, both the government and the Reserve Bank of India are quite chilled out about this move. Indian rupee is a volatile currency, for all you know, and it does.
So it looks like the euro got smacked there. Not really ready to take out the lows there in the dollar index. Just doesn't look right.
Sell-off is the dollar strength. What's happened really is we are focusing so much on Turkey and Argentina, which are idiosyncratic stories, and that's distracting us from the big problem, which is dollar strength. And India got hit because of its current account deficit to some extent and its dependence on oil imports to some extent. But it is an economy that's growing well, and it's a strong economy. It has enough reserves. About 85% of its imports are covered by reserves. The leader in India, Narendra Modi, has a reputation of being a reformer. Unlike Erdogan or Macri, he is much more committed to reform. So all those reasons suggest that this is a different move, not to be confused with Argentina or Turkey. In fact, if anything, that has made the Indian rupee more attractive going forward.
All right, Srini, thanks so much for joining us. Bloomberg Srini, Siva Balan there talking to us about emerging markets, especially emerging market currencies, which are really, I think, one of the big themes of today's market. Still with us, Maximilian Kunkel, CIO for Germany at UBS Global Wealth Management. And Srini was talking about the impact of, obviously, dollar strength on these pairs, as most of them are priced that way. I think this is probably the most interesting thing to take away from it. This is a Bloomberg dollar index over the last, year to date, and you can see the strength that we gained. We all felt that. Since August 15th, we've started a little bit of a downtrend here, and it looks like that may stick. What's your thought on the dollar?
Well, if you're looking really what's been driving the dollar, it's not rates differentials, it's clearly the growth differential, which has opened up year to date relative to other economies. And as we are starting to see that growth differential slowly peaking, more likely than not, we're also going to see a consolidation phase in the dollar. And our view is actually over 12-month period that the dollar is likely going to weaken against most other currencies, also because that growth differential is starting to narrow again.
Maximilian, is now the entry point into EM, or is there a better one coming?
What we are seeing, we talked at the beginning of the show, we talked about this massive outperformance of US equities, particularly against emerging markets of late, which has been unusual by any standard. And what we are seeing at the moment is that this is a very good time, particularly for clients that nowadays sit on outsized position in US equities due to that outperformance, to rebalance some of that towards emerging markets. Because the longer term story in emerging markets continues to be a very, very solid one. And whilst in the short term, of course, dollar strength as well as uncertainty about trade may weigh on emerging markets, longer term we continue to believe it's a very, very important element in any portfolio.
I just want to quickly bring it back to this chart, and it's amazing that we see U.S. stocks at an all-time high, trading 18 times future earnings with the strength of the dollar. Here you see European stocks trading at only 14 times earnings. Why this differential, and will they come back together?
first of all, it's quite unlikely it's going to come back together because of the French. So is due to the sector composition of the two different indices. We have on the one hand the United States, which is long disrupting sectors, and Europe, which is long disrupted sectors, and that explains also the difference here. You have a massive divergence in terms of return on equity developments over the last few years, which has clearly favoured the US versus Europe.
All right. I hope Hillary also doesn't mind the color issues on this chart, but I thought it's obvious that Europe has to be blue, right? Japan there is red and the U.S. white. Maximilian, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time in the studio this morning. Maximilian Kunkel, CIO for Germany at UBS Global Wealth Management. He's going to join us on Radio Guy, so our viewers can turn into listeners if they like on London DAB Digital at the top of the hour, or they can just type Radio Go on the Bloomberg.
Absolutely. Matt, let's talk about one of the most read stories on the Bloomberg this morning, and that is Africa's largest mobile phone company, MTN. The stock is down to a 9-year low. Why? Nigeria's central bank has ordered a refund of $8.1 billion. Now, it alleges that the wireless carrier illegally moved money out of the country. MTN, quote, strongly refutes that claim. Paul Wallace joins us now from Lagos in Nigeria. Paul, give us some background on this.
Well, this is an issue that has dragged on for a while. The central bank's and lawmakers' allegations against MTN allegedly illegally repatriating money from the country first surfaced about 2 years ago. And lawmakers in a report actually cleared MTN last year. And most people thought the issue had been buried. But yesterday it surfaced out of the blue with the statement from the central bank, and it used very sort of colourful language that said what it was describing that those money
relationship with North Korea.
The UK government has told the European Union it must compromise on its opposition to Prime Minister Theresa May's plans or risk a no-deal Brexit. Even that, the pound rallied to its highest level for 3 weeks yesterday, despite minimal evidence of any thaw in the frozen Brexit negotiations. At the same time, France's finance minister said Britain couldn't have its cake and eat it as it quits the EU.
Everybody has also to be aware that you cannot be in and out. You cannot be part of the European construction, out of the European continent, and also benefiting of all the advantages of being a full member of the European Union. If you are out of the European Union, you do not have the same position, the same rights, and the same advantages than the other member states.
The International Monetary Fund has said it will consider Argentina's request to speed up disbursements from a $50 billion credit line as the government seeks to restore investor confidence. That came about 9 hours after President Mauricio Macri surprised the nation by saying that his country needed the money to demonstrate it had enough cash on hand to fund the 2019 budget without going further into debt. The peso plunged to a record low. And Donald Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, may not learn for several weeks if he'll have to face off against U.S. Special Counsel Robert Mueller in a third trial. Mueller is seeking more time to decide whether to retry Manafort on 10 counts. Facing a deadline yesterday to make a decision, Mueller said his team didn't have enough information to make that call because Manafort's lawyers had not filed their post-trial motions. The judge did not immediately rule on the request. Global news 24 hours a day on air and to TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Taylor Riggs. This is Bloomberg. Era.
Thanks so much, Taylor. Now, US President Donald Trump has said that talks with Canada to overhaul the North American Free Trade Agreement are going well, expressing optimism the two countries could reach a deal this week.
We're negotiating with them right now. They want to be a part of the deal. And we gave till Friday, and I think we're probably on track. We'll see what happens, but in any event, things are working out very well.
Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said his government is trying to reach agreement with the US this week, but he added that Canada won't sacrifice its goal of getting the, quote, right deal. And joining us now from Hong Kong is Bloomberg's senior international editor, Jody Schneider. Jody, great to have you with us. So the deal-making continues in Washington with Canada. We've heard some optimism from President Trump. Of course, Canada's Foreign Minister, Chrystia Freeland, saying a huge amount of work is left on specific issues. What are some of those specific issues?
Yeah, Canada is less optimistic than President Trump sounds because they have a few what they view as deal breakers. One is how dairy products are treated. That is being negotiated, but there's still some work to be done there, according to the Canadian Foreign Minister and Prime Minister Trudeau. But the real issue, the real deal breaker for Canada, and this could determine the fate of the whole deal, is on how whether anti-dumping will be treated by resolution of that will be done by panels. This is a really big issue for Canada. They've walked away from other deals where they did not get these panels to determine these kinds of resolutions, and they've said this has to happen. There is not clear language in the current agreement the U.S. and Mexico reached on this issue, and this could really determine whether or not Canada signs on. Either the U.S. or Canada has to win on this. The U.S. has promised to have a deal to announce to the U.S. Congress by this Friday, so there's a really tough deadline here, and we'll see whether or not Canada signs or not.
Yeah, a tough deadline, Jody, and if we don't get an agreement by Friday, what happens then?
Well, the U.S. wants that agreement soon because
non-standard charter to return $8.1 billion it says was illegally expatriated by mobile phone company MTN Group over 8 years through 2015. The wireless operator, quote, strongly refuted the claim. Nigeria's central bank said the 4 banks will be fined about $16 million. MTN was also ordered to participate in the refund. MTN shares have fallen sharply in Johannesburg trading. And Ford has seen its credit rating cut to 1 notch above junk by Moody's, adding to problems that include a restructuring plan that could take years to complete. Moody's downgraded the company to Baa3 with a negative outlook, citing the erosion of Ford's global business position and the turnaround plan that could cost more than $10 billion in the next 3 to 5 years. Vodafone Hutchison Australia has said it will merge with local broadband provider TPG Telecom in an attempt to better challenge market leader Telstra. The transaction locks in UK-based Vodafone and Hong Kong's CK Hutchison for 2 years. Some $3.5 billion of net debt amassed by the phone venture is being ring-fenced from the deal and will be guaranteed by 2 offshore giants. And that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Mayra.
Taylor, thank you so much. Now, Argentina's peso has plunged more than 7% to a record low after President Mauricio Macri appealed to the IMF for cash faster. The fund approved a $15 billion payout in June as part of a $50 billion credit line. The rally across emerging markets waned as concern over Argentina and Turkey reminded investors of the fragile landscape. And joining us now is our emerging markets editor, Srini Sivabalan. Valentin Marinov from Credit Agricole still with us as well. Srini, great to see you.
Hello.
So the lira still declining again today after declines yesterday, despite some moves by the central bank and those worries over Argentina and Turkey kind of having an impact across EMFX. Should we be worried at this point now about the spillover effect from these two countries?
Well, in emerging markets, we have reached a stage when, if Turkey's lira falls 3% or the Argentine peso falls 7%, people are asking, May, did you wake me up for this? We are getting used to this amount of volatility because these are idiosyncratic stories. But there are 2 separate sell-offs happening in emerging markets. One driven by these individual stories, the other driven by dollar strength, and the one should not be confused with the other. So the sell-off in the vulnerable emerging markets such as Argentina and Turkey are pretty much contained within those environments. But we should be worrying more about what the dollar does and focusing more on the direction for the dollar, because Asian currencies have a completely different dynamic altogether, and they are going to be affected by Fed policy and global growth and US growth differential and so on. And that is where the pain points lie.
Yeah, Srini, I understand your point on the dollar, and I can see Valentin nodding, so we'll bring you in a second, Valentin. But in terms of Turkey and Argentina, is there any reason for markets to sort of stop being as negative as they are right now, given how far we've fallen?
It depends on those 2 governments, basically, because investors are in a mood to send a strong message to these governments that they must act with fiscal responsibility. They must cut back expenditure, improve fiscal balances. Pending that, no amount of assurances and interest rate increases are going to help. So now the focus is on fiscal policy, and if the government's response, definitely there's a huge potential for these 2 currencies. The carry trade opportunity in these 2 currencies is immense. If this bleeding stops, you could make 4 percentage points of return on the peso for every unit of volatility. This is very similar returns on Turkish lira. So if these 2 governments take concrete measures, not trying to hoodwink investors with promises and pledges, but actual specific action, then they have scope for rebound.
Valentin?
Oh, well, indeed. Just following on what was said, really, there are reasons to expect that King Dollar may stage a return going forward. The idiosyncratic, the individual currencies, the idiosyncratic factors driving the price action, individual currencies could be then augmented really by the threat of a trade war between
China and the US going into next week, and we all well know that the combination of Fed tightening, outperforming US economy, and the threat of a global trade war has fueled that persistent, pervasive dollar scarcity that has been kind of supporting the dollar across a very broad range of vulnerable emerging market currencies. So that may be just the beginning of a broader correction.
Right, and Valentin, the spillover into the euro, because we did see that as well, is that euro weakness done now? I know you're targeting, what, 121 year end on euro dollar?
Yeah, we think that we do not expect a repeat of that episode where the Turkish lira weakness spilled over into euro weakness. We do not think that the problems, potential problems that European banks with exposure to Turkey, those problems could ultimately derail the path of cautious policy normalization that the ECB is on at the moment. From that point of view, we don't think that it's a significant negative for the euro. Either way, we think that the economic outperformance we expect out of the eurozone will justify such normalization and should boost the outlook for the euro.
Okay, Valentin Marinov from Credit Agricole stays with us, and thank you so much to Srini Sivavalan from our emerging markets team. Stay with Bloomberg. We'll bring you an exclusive interview with Credit Suisse CEO Tidjane Thiam. Catch that conversation tomorrow morning. And up next, we hear from the CEO of Samsonite. This is Bloomberg. looking at live pictures of Prime Minister Theresa May as she visits Kenya. Of course, this has been a three-country tour for her on the continent of Africa, which started in South Africa. She then moved on to Nigeria, and here we are seeing pictures of Theresa May's visit to Kenya. You're watching Bloomberg Surveillance, and Samsonite International says the trade war between the US and China is damping sentiment among Chinese consumers. The world's top luggage maker also said that will play into slower sales growth in its second biggest market, another sign of the fallout from the tit-for-tat tariffs.
As we move into the second half, I think we'll probably be into the high single-digit range for China. I do see consumers feeling some of the impacts, probably to trade wars, which I know is hot in the news prior today, and I do think that has some impact to consumer confidence and sentiment.
Still with us, Valentin Marinov from Credit Agricole. Valentin, the trade discussions putting up some sort of fault lines in terms of currencies against the dollar.
And it certainly adds a lot of relative value to the G10 space. I already mentioned like the Canadian dollar, but by the same token, we think that Aussie and Kiwi should continue to underperform. We're also a bit more constructive on the outcome of the EU-US trade negotiations. So from that point of view, also relatively speaking, bullish euro. So you have your winners, you have your losers. The dollar is kind of stuck in between there, but certainly trade discussions will likely be with us in coming months and quarters. And I guess the one interesting question, like for the near term, is whether the trade discussions between the US and China will add to that, I would say, risk-off mood that seems to be creeping back into the market, especially if you look at some of the dollar crosses, dollar Asia, but also dollar against some of the LATAM currencies.
All right, thank you so much, Valentin Marinov from Credit Agricole stays with us. And up next, going round in circles, French President Macron is said to propose a new structure for the EU and its partners based on concentric rings. But will other member states get on board? And how will it affect Britain's relationship with the bloc? We'll discuss that next. This is Bloomberg. politics. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. I'm Naira Chevich in London. Now let's check in on what's trending across the Bloomberg universe. In Business Week, South Korea could be home to the world's first 5G city. Pangyo Zero City is a $720 million project that looks to bring unlimited bandwidth to everything from roads to surgery to the emergency services. On Bloomberg.com, the EU wants to keep ties to the UK as close as possible after Brexit. That's according to the bloc's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier. But he also reiterated the EU is planning for all possible outcomes, including no deal. And our most read stories on the Bloomberg terminal. In third place, Qantas says the 20-hour flight is coming and it may have a gym and bunks. In second, Amazon closes in on a $1 trillion market cap. And top, Trump blames China for stalled nuclear talks with North Korea. Find out more now across all of Bloomberg's platforms. And now it's time for our weekly Brexit show. And for that, let's get the Bloomberg Brexit Bulletin. Here's Taylor Riggs. Taylor.
Naira, the UK and the European Union are said to have dropped their October deadline for a Brexit deal. While both sides publicly say they want an agreement wrapped up in the next 7 weeks, Bloomberg understands that behind the scenes, senior officials admit this is unlikely. Sources tell us that they now aim to finalize the divorce terms by the middle of November at the latest. The UK government has told the European Union it must compromise on its opposition to Prime Minister Theresa May's plans or risk a no-deal Brexit. Even so, the pound rallied to its highest level in 3 weeks yesterday, despite minimal evidence of any thaw in the frozen Brexit negotiations. At the same time, France's finance minister said Britain could not have its cake and eat it as it quits the EU.
Everybody has also to be aware that you cannot be in and out. You cannot be out of the European construction, out of the European continent, and also benefiting of all the advantages of being a full member of the European Union. If you are out of the European Union, you do not have the same position, the same rights, and the same advantages than the other member states.
France is preparing contingency plans in the event of a no-deal Brexit. The government will present a draft bill in the coming weeks to prepare measures such as facilitating the presence of British citizens already living in France and ensure fluid frontier controls after the UK exits the EU. It underlines rising concern that Britain may crash out of the bloc with no deal ready on time. And the UK's Prime Minister unveiled plans to boost Britain's investment in Africa after Brexit. In a speech in Cape Town, Theresa May said she's, quote, unashamed about ensuring the money her country sends in aid to Africa benefits Britain too. Her first trip to the continent as Prime Minister is also taking part in Nigeria and Kenya. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Taylor Riggs. This is Bloomberg. Naira.
Thank you so much, Taylor. Just got some breaking news to bring you before we move back to Brexit. PetroChina first half net income coming through at 27.1 billion yuan. We'll bring you any more updates as we get them. But now let's get back to Brexit. And Emmanuel Macron has weighed in on the Brexit debate, proposing a new structure for the EU's alliances. According to The Times, the French president sees the relationship as a series of concentric circles with Europe and the euro in the middle and the UK in the second ring. He plans to talk about the plan, which depends on an amicable Brexit, at a summit in Austria in September. So what does this mean for European unity and the relationships with its partners? Joining us now from Brussels is Maria de Metzis, Deputy Director at Bruegel. Maria, great to have you. Thank you for joining us. I want to start simply by asking you whether the prospect of a no deal has increased this week.
Well, that's a very difficult question to ask. I mean, it is still a non-zero probability event, and since we are approaching the deadline and we're not seeing a concrete deal on paper, the probability is in fact increasing. So it's right that we need to consider contingency plans like France is doing, but also other countries are. But at the same time, it's also very important to realize that we must avoid a no-deal Brexit. It doesn't benefit anybody. It doesn't benefit the UK, and it doesn't benefit the EU. So we really need, even at the 11th hour, to try and sort it out.
What would you call the 11th hour? What would be the last opportunity that we could still get a deal at the end of this? Because the deadline already is being pushed back.
Yes, indeed. The 11th hour definition in the European Union is not a fixed thing. But we had hoped that October, the summit in October, the 18th and 19th, would have been the last time, the last, if you like, limit that we would need for a deal, so that it can then go to national parliaments, be ratified, and then back to Britain for ratification after Christmas. That seems unlikely, so the next opportunity for ratification or for an agreement between the EU leaders will be the summit after that, which is just before Christmas. And I think that really is the ultimate deadline for the EU leaders and the UK to come to a concrete agreement.
Now, speaking of the EU, we saw the pound rally yesterday on comments from Michel Barnier about an unprecedented deal with the UK. Questions over whether that rally was overdone. We're already seeing the pound reversing gains now. It dropped back briefly below 130. In terms of the deal with the UK, what should the EU be looking for at this stage?
It should be looking to try and stay as close to the current arrangement that we have, namely that trade can be as free as possible. It cannot be as free as we have it right now, otherwise we will be still a member of the single market. But we need to have a free flow of goods and a free flow of services arranged with minimum interruptions for a deal to be, in my view, a successful one. Then after that, we need to have a very concrete deal on the flow of people, of labour. How do we treat the EU citizens that are already in the UK, and separately, how do we deal with the UK citizens that are in the EU? That's for the ones that are already here. And what will be the future arrangement in terms of accepting citizens from the continent to the UK and back? These are the two things that, in my view, need to have concrete answers. And after that, we can work out the details.
But Maria, the thing is that what you've described might begin to sound like Brexit in name only for some of the hardliners in the UK.
Yes and no. It will be the reason why a no Brexit deal is not a good idea is because it will bring the economics back, both for the UK and the EU. If we're trying to preserve good economic relationships and ensure the economies grow, we have to stay as close as possible. What is different is under what jurisdiction that happens, and the Brexiteers are arguing that we should not follow EU law, whereas the EU is arguing now the UK is a smaller country and needs to adapt, and needs to accept the EU law. That is a bone of contention. But in terms of the economics, I think we should try and stay as close as possible.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Maria Demetz is Deputy Director at Bruegel. And up next, Britain's warning to Brussels. The UK government says the EU must compromise or risk a no-deal Brexit. We'll talk the pound next. This is Bloomberg. weekly Brexit programme. I'm Naira Chehich in London. Now, the UK government has told the EU it must compromise on Theresa May's plans or risk a no-deal Brexit as the timeline for reaching an agreement slips back. Negotiations resume tomorrow when Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab holds a meeting in Brussels with his European Commission counterpart Michel Barnier. The pound is holding on just about to yesterday's 1% rally after Barnier reiterated that he'd be ready to propose an unprecedented new partnership with the UK. So are spot traders right to get excited? Still with us, Valentin Marinoff from Credit Agricole. Valentin, pound a little bit whipsawed because we've then heard from Michel Barnier again today, talking about the fact that, of course, one of the options is a no deal as well. What does yesterday's jump of more than 1% tell you about positioning in sterling?
A couple of things really. One was the abatement of the concern about no-deal Brexit was clearly there. Effectively, both Raab and Barnier told us that they're will be working on it to get a deal as soon as possible. And a lot of the move had to do with positioning. Market is short the pound. The pound looks undervalued according to various measures against euro, against the dollar. And the combination of all these factors did trigger the move higher.
And in terms of where we are now, I mean, we're just about holding above, well, no, we're just below 130 now, 129.94. Do we just come back down from here then?
Well, we maintain a relatively cautious stance. Our forecast for this quarter is, I guess, somewhat optimistic, a bit above 130, but I'm happy to admit that we may stay well close to these levels as investors remain in holding pattern, awaiting for more concrete evidence that progress has been made. Ultimately, we think that the pound is heading higher. We think that a softer Brexit is on the table. That may come at the price of potential extension of the Article 50 implementation down the road. There will be a lot of political uncertainty associated with that. But we think that the risks for the pound over like 6-12 months clearly on the upside. We think that 140 cable 150 before long cannot be excluded. Euro sterling lower towards 88, 87 also on the cards. But we're talking really longer term outlook. Before that, the persistent political uncertainty about how the Brexit negotiations really will progress from here will likely keep any bulls on the sidelines for the time being.
I mean, 140, 150 from here would be quite a significant rally given where we trade right now. So how would you time that? Like, what are you waiting for, and where are the moments where you would strike with that more bullish long-term outlook?
Well, obviously, the upcoming EU summits, right, will be the key, the focal point, really, for the pound investors. Clearly, the October summit now has lost significance, but then you had the November presumed summit plus the December one. They will be key, right? So, and I guess key to watch would be really, well, we're going to have a deal, and whether that deal will involve, I would say, our expectations, a free trade agreement that will allow free trade in goods, will exclude services, but ultimately could help resolve the issue with the Irish border, and something that could be indeed agreeable for the UK Parliament, for the EU Parliament. If we get that on the table, that will be the sign, that will be the signal for the bulls to step in and buy the pound. In terms of timing, as I was saying, November or December could be pretty interesting. So these are the two summits I'll be focusing on.
Yeah, and if we do get that soft Brexit outcome that you are predicting, what does that mean then for the Bank of England? Do you think there'll be significant repricing in the rates markets in terms of hikes?
Well, to a degree, right? So it's the Brexit uncertainty has dealt quite a blow to the UK economy, right? It is the case that most of the resilience we saw in the immediate aftermath of the EU referendum was due to a sharp build-up in consumer leverage. In the meantime, that leverage build-up has slowed down. Access to funding is now more expensive, it's less desirable, business investment has slowed down. So damage has been done. So I guess the Bank of England will want to assess what really the implications of that Brexit uncertainty is before they potentially adjust their outlook. For the time being, they seem happy to hike once per year, right? And I would not expect an immediate change in that view, but down the road, the upshot would be that ultimately we may need more hikes than expected at the moment, especially if the recovery in the economy on the back of that outcome is swifter or indeed more aggressive than expected by the Bank of England.
We've talked about your target for cable, but also for euro sterling. What about the pound against some other currencies? Because we've been talking about potential fault lines and opportunities just to do with the general risk on, risk off around trades.
it's the case that if you look at the pound against the Antipodeans or indeed Asian currencies, you could clearly see some value there. The pound looks quite undervalued against both Australian dollar and indeed the New Zealand dollar. So these are interesting longs, no doubt. At the same time, sterling Swiss is another interesting long there. We think that the Swiss franc is quite overvalued. The pound is undervalued. So one of the better trades really to have on betting really on a softer Brexit outcome would be to be long sterling Swiss as well. The carry there, the very negative Swiss rate, certainly likely to up to the appeal of that position.
Long sterling Swissy on the outcome of a soft Brexit. Interesting. Thank you, Valentin Marinov from Credit Agricole stays with us. And up next, hitting new highs, US stocks reached a record again yesterday and signs are mounting that the run could continue. How much steam do these equities have? We'll explore next. This is Bloomberg. Finance, politics. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. I'm Naira Chahich in London. Stocks hitting record highs in the US session yesterday. The S&P 500 closed at 2914, above 2900 for the first time, and signs are mounting that investors expect the ride to continue. Let's get more with Anne-Marie Hordern. Anne-Marie, what have you got for us?
Thanks, Naira. That's right. US stocks hitting that record high. S&P 500 above that 2900 mark. The surge pushed the gauge into overbought territory for the first time since January. Of course, we saw all those corrections in the market. Option positions are pointing to more gains. As you can see here in the blue, this is where the strategists are saying it's going to go. Barclays, Weeden & Co. now expecting the S&P to hit 3,000. If they're right, it'll give the equity benchmark a 12% gain for the year. So, of course, S&P 500 waiting for that market to open up in New York. One to watch today. And moving on, I also want to look at the NASDAQ. It hit a fresh high as well as those tech stock surge. We had Amazon, Google parent, Alphabet also climbing, following that upright report from Morgan Stanley. But don't get too hot on tech stocks yet. This is a great chart that Hillary Clark pointed me to, and this shows the breadth of what's happening. As you can see here, the S&P is in the blue, and the NASDAQ 200-day moving average is in the white. And the S&P has been stronger than tech stocks in general, with a larger share of members above that 200-day moving average. So really keep a focus on this as well, in terms of you can see the futures looking like for the NASDAQ, as well as where strategists are putting for the S&P.
Anne-Marie Horden, thank you so much. And now let's get the Bloomberg Business Flash. Here's Taylor Riggs. Taylor.
Naira, Nigeria has ordered 4 banks, including Citigroup and Standard Chartered, to return $8.1 billion it says was illegally expatriated by mobile phone company MTN Group over 8 years through 2015. The wireless operator, quote, strongly refuted the claim. Nigeria's central bank said the 4 banks will be fined about $16 million. MTN was also ordered to participate in the refund. MTN shares have fallen sharply in Johannesburg trading. Ford has seen its credit rating cut to 1 notch above junk by Moody's, adding to problems that include a restructuring plan that could take years to complete. Moody's downgraded the company to Baa3 with a negative outlook, citing the erosion of Ford's global business position and the turnaround plan that could cost more than $10 billion in the next 3 to 5 years. And Vodafone Hutchison Australia has said it will merge with local broadband provider TPG Telecom in an attempt to better challenge market leader Telstra. The transaction locks in UK-based Vodafone and Hong Kong's CK Hutchison for 2 years. Some $3.5 billion of net debt amassed by their phone venture is being ring-fenced from the deal and will be guaranteed by the 2 offshore giants. Credit Suisse is having second thoughts about doing business with the owner of the National Enquirer, which is at the center of a scandal involving hush money payments in 2016 to women who had affairs with Donald Trump. Bloomberg has learned that the Swiss bank was planning to help American media refinance about $425 million of debt. But amid a flurry of negative headlines, it is seeking to back out of arranging the debt. Representatives for Credit Suisse and American media declined to comment. And that's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Naira.
Thank you so much, Taylor Riggs. Now, still with us, Valentin Marinov from Credit Agricole. Valentin, let's get back to the dollar, because we were just talking about U.S. equities before we went to the Business Flash. Is there sort of a prospect of a stronger dollar hurting U.S. equities?
Well, usually, historically, there is a negative correlation that's explained through the impact of stronger currency on the revenues of multinationals that are part of those stock indices. I mean, right now, that correlation, I think, is compromised by the repatriation of earnings by U.S. corporates that then flowed back into the U.S. stock markets. I mean, if you look at statistics like the share buybacks in the U.S., they've hit a new multi-year high. And I think that's a testament to the fact that the U.S. corporates are holding close to $3 trillion potentially dollar worth of really earnings that will be going back home. It's quite telling that the technical, like Google, Amazon, indeed, all the companies that are known to hold quite a large amount of unrepatriated earnings, their stocks are doing so as a result, even though the dollar is strong, is appreciating.
Oh, a lot to get to today, as every day. But first, let me mention to you that you need to update your resume. Okay, let's be real about this. Your resume, it's decent. You know, it's good, but it could always be better because you need to be adding skills all the time. The idea that you're going to be at one company for 50 years and then retire with a gold watch, it's not true anymore. And that's why you need to be constantly adding skills to your resume. It gives you greater job leverage, it gives you greater pay leverage, and that's why you need Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform with over 20,000 classes in business, design, technology, and more. You can take classes in social media marketing and illustration, data science, mobile photography, creative writing. You name it, they've got it. I've taken classes in social media marketing myself from Skillshare. It is fantastic. They're 45-minute classes taught by experts. Whether you're trying to deepen your professional skill set, start a side hustle, or just explore a new passion, Skillshare is there to keep you learning and thriving. Go check it out right now and get a special deal. Join the millions of students already learning at Skillshare by going to Skillshare.com and you use /Shapiro. Skillshare.com/Shapiro. You get 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents. That's right. Again, Skillshare is offering my listeners 2 months of unlimited access to over 20,000 classes for just 99 cents. Again, Skillshare.com/Shapiro to start those 2 months now. Skillshare.com/Shapiro. Make that resume better. Again, Skillshare.com/Shapiro. Okay, so the media are absolutely destroying themselves on the shoals of their own political bias. The clearest example of this doesn't even have to do with President Trump today. The clearest example of this has to do with the scandal that is now plaguing the Catholic Church. Now, as I have said, I think it is very important to put in context the fact that the Catholic Church, which has obviously an institutional problem with the sexual abuse of minors, is not unique in this way. There are lots of institutions across the United States and internationally in which abuse of children is sort of overlooked by people in power, specifically to maintain the supposed credibility of those institutions. The Catholic Church just happens to be the most prominent of them, and I think for good reason, because the Catholic Church, like other religious institutions, is seen and should be seen as a higher moral arbiter. The fact is that the Catholic Church stands at the precipice between secularism and religion, and Jews, Protestants, people of all other faith persuasions should be deeply troubled by what's happening inside the Catholic Church. Well, to recap, the Catholic Church basically was experiencing a serious issue in which a cardinal named McCarrick was accused of the abuse of a bunch of minors, as well as with homosexual activity with a bunch of seminarians as well. He was accused by one of his, by an archbishop named Carlo Maria Vigano. The accusation is that the higher ups at the church, particularly Pope Francis, basically covered all this up, that he knew about this, and that Cardinal McCarrick was put into essentially a form of private excommunication almost. He was basically ordered to do prayer and penance for the rest of his life by Pope Benedict, and then Francis took him out of that and made him a public figure again. That was the accusation that was made by Vigano. And all of this matters because now the media are coming out and they are defending the Pope. They're defending Pope Francis. Pope Francis refuses to comment on this. He has not confirmed or denied that he knew that this cardinal was engaged in homosexual abuses inside the church. And there are two forms of abuse, obviously. There's homosexual abuses because it's against Catholic canon law for priests to engage in sexual activity of any sort, and then it's doubly against canon law for them to engage in homosexual activity, and then it is triply against canon law to engage in all of that plus children. Well, now it turns out the members of the upper echelon of the church, Pope Francis' greatest defenders, are coming out and defending Pope Francis, not by saying that Pope Francis fights this kind of stuff within the church on a regular basis. Instead, they're fighting back by suggesting that Pope Francis should be given a pass because Pope Francis is to the left on politics. Leading the way is Cardinal Blaise Kupich. Blaise Kupich is one of the archbishops, I believe, over in Chicago, and he is deeply tied in with Pope Francis, particularly. His comments on this scandal are absolutely disgusting.
The Pope has a bigger agenda. He's got to get on with other things of talking about the environment and protecting migrants and carrying on the work of the church. We're not going to go down a rabbit hole on this.
How insane is that statement? Hey, we're not going to go down a rabbit hole on stopping child molestation inside the church. We have to focus on greater issues like climate change and illegal immigration. Those are the bigger issues, not the sexual abuse of minors by people in positions of authority supposedly representing God and Jesus. No. What it really has to do with is protecting the Catholic Church from allegations that would stop their progressive agenda. Now, I've been a longtime critic of Pope Francis. I think a lot of conservative Catholics have joined me in that criticism, or rather, I have joined them in that criticism. The reality is that Pope Francis is a liberation theologist who believes that the auspices of the church ought to be used to push a sort of proto-Marxist economics, as well as a social liberalism when it comes to issues various and sundry. He has not changed church doctrine with regard to abortion, but he's been incredibly soft on LGBT issues, particularly on the social side. He's also been extraordinarily to the left on issues of climate change, economic redistribution, and illegal immigration. That comment by Kupich is so telling, Cardinal Kupich, to say that the Pope has a bigger agenda. He's got to get on with other things like talking about the environment and protecting migrants and carrying on the work of the church. That's an insane statement. How insane is that statement? The Babylon Bee, which is a parody website, they printed a headline 2 weeks ago in which they said, Pope defends himself from allegations of cover-up of child molestation by pointing to climate change work. It was a parody headline. And then Kupich actually said the parody headline. And prosecutors are saying now, it's not just this one Cardinal Vigano who's accusing the church of knowing about all this. According to a state attorney general in Pennsylvania, the Vatican knew about all of this as well. This is according to Reuters. The Vatican knew of a cover-up of child sex abuse by Roman Catholic priests in Pennsylvania through secret archives that bishops in the state shared with church leaders in Rome, according to State Attorney General Josh Shapiro. No relation. Though Catholic bishops in Pennsylvania systematically denied the sexual abuse of thousands of children over a 70-year period, They secretly documented the cases and often sent information on them to the Vatican, Shapiro told 2 national news shows. Shapiro first made the allegations against the Vatican during an August 14th news conference to unveil a report on a 2-year investigation into how Catholic clergymen in the state allegedly groomed and sexually abused children. It was largely based on documents from the archives kept by the state's 6 dioceses, he said. He said, quote, there are specific examples where when the abuse occurred, the priests would go, the bishops would go and lie to parishioners, lie to law enforcement, lie to the public, but then document all the abuse in secret archives that they would share oftentimes with the Vatican. Shapiro did not comment on whether Pope Francis or his predecessors knew of the information. Again, the allegation is by Cardinal Vigano that Pope Francis knew all about them. Vigano over the weekend published this 11-page public statement talking about Pope Francis and Pope Francis's willingness to overlook all of this and calling on Francis to resign on the grounds the Pope knew for years about the sexual misconduct of Cardinal McCarrick. Vigano said he told the Pope himself 5 years ago, a little more than 3 months after Francis' election, and Francis reacted badly to that and put pressure on him in the opposite direction, was actually angry at him for having revealed any of this stuff. George Weigel is a senior fellow in Catholic Studies at the Ethics and Public Policy Center in Washington, D.C. He said, Vigano is a loyal churchman. If he is making these allegations now and calling for Francis' resignation, it is for the gravest reasons. Now, how are the media treating all of this? You would imagine the media might be a little upset. Like normally, the media are pretty upset when it comes to Catholic priests abusing children. Right? There was a movie that just won an Oscar based on this. Right? Spotlight was based on the Boston Globe uncovering hundreds of abuse cases in Massachusetts Archdiocese. So the media have been all over sexual scandals within the Catholic Church for good reasons and bad. Good reasons because all of that stuff should be uncovered and all of it should be brought to light, and that stuff should be, I mean, it's evil, and people involved should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The bad is that it's pretty obvious there is a disparate motivation in the media for going after the Catholic Church as opposed to, say, other religious institutions that are more minority or non-religious institutions in which sexual abuse has become a serious problem, like the American public schools. With all of that said, the media were certainly attentive to this problem inside the Catholic Church for years and years and years and years, and, as I say, with good reason. But in this particular case, they're not reacting. They are not reacting with the sort of outrage you would normally see directed at the Catholic Church. Instead, their outreach is directed at the people who are making the accusations. They're very upset with Cardinal Vigano. They're very upset with Catholics who are upset with Pope Francis. Why? Because Pope Francis must be protected at all costs, because Pope Francis is a political leftist. And this is a headline from Reuters. Okay, here it is, by Philip Pulella. Defenders rally around the Pope, fear conservatives escalating war. Conservatives escalating war? Like, really? That's the great fear here? Not the Catholic Church covering up cases of sexual abuse of minors? Not the violation of Catholic canon law over and over and over by top members of the church with the knowledge of the top Vatican hierarchy? That's not the real issue here. The only real issue here is that Pope Francis has fallen under assault. This is why folks don't trust the media, and they shouldn't trust the media, because when it comes to protecting their favorite figures, the media will rush to their defense at the first available opportunity, whether it is Barack Obama or Pope Francis. They like Pope Francis because they think that he is a liberal when it comes to matters of homosexuality, and when it comes to matters of climate change, and when it comes to matters of illegal immigration. And so they are rallying around Pope Francis, even though it now appears there are significant, credible allegations that Pope Francis knew of molestation of priests, right? That priests were engaged in homosexual activities. Part of this is that the media are deeply uncomfortable with any attempt to correlate the problem of a homosexual subculture inside the Catholic Church and the problems of targeting abuse of minors. So the fact is that Cardinal McCarrick, the accusations made by Vigano, don't actually even extend to the abuse of minors. They just extend to Vigano basically having a bunch of homosexual affairs with seminarians and pressuring those seminarians into sex. The media doesn't think that's a bad thing, and so they're angry that conservatives are talking about that in the first place. They also are refusing to acknowledge that there is, in fact, a correlation between McCarrick's activities in certain areas and McCarrick's activities in other areas. And there are certain uncomfortable truths that no one is allowed to speak about the culture of the church and the targeting, particularly of young males in the church. Okay, the reality is that a disproportionate number of the victims of sexual abuse for minors in the church have been male, which is something that the media don't want to talk about, specifically because they think that will then be used as a way to club homosexuals and gay and lesbian folks and tar them as innate child molesters. I don't think that has to be done. I think that you can point out that there is a disparity in the number of boys who have been abused in the church and girls who have been abused in the church without accusing all homosexuals, for example, of wanting to prey on children, which is a bunch of nonsense. But the attempt to defend Pope Francis is obviously very telling. That wasn't even the worst headline of the day. I'll give you the worst headline of the day, courtesy of the New York Times, in just a second. But first, let's talk about managing your money. Betterment is the best way to manage your money. So the reality is that if you are somebody who has a full-time job and you just take your money and you stick it in the bank, you're probably not managing your money the best way you could be. You're probably just leaving it in the bank account and hoping that nothing happens to it. But you could be taking that money and you could be allowing that money to grow. And that's what Betterment helps you with. They give you technology designed to help you make more from your investments, unlimited expert advice designed to help you make smart financial decisions, tax efficient investing strategies that give you an edge, low transparent fees as well, and constant access to information and tools that allow you to track progress toward your goals. So it's your online investment advisor. You should feel like a smart, savvy investor. I have a financial advisor. You should too, and it shouldn't cost you an arm and a leg. Betterment helps you outsmart average. Now, investing does involve risk, but Ben Shapiro listeners can get up to 1 year managed for free. For more information, visit betterment.com/Shapiro. That's betterment.com/Shapiro, betterment.com/Shapiro. Again, this helps you manage your money in the best possible way. It's your online financial advisor. Betterment helps you outsmart average and get up to 1 year managed for free at betterment.com/Shapiro. That lets them know that we sent you. The worst headline of the day was not the Reuters headline, defenders rally around the Pope, fear conservatives escalating war. The worst headline of the day was this from the New York Times. Vatican power struggle bursts into open as conservatives pounce. So this has become sort of a meme on the right, is that when the media report on issues that are harmful to the left, it's never leftists within the church defend Pope as he covers up sexual abuse allegedly. That's not the headline. The headline isn't leftists in the media cover for Pope as Pope undergoes allegations of sexual abuse cover-ups. That's not the line. The line is conservatives pounce. So when it is a grave sin on the part of somebody on the left, it's conservatives pounce. When it's a grave sin on the part of somebody on the right, it's the conservative committed the sin. That's the way the media cover these issues. That's the way the New York Times covers these issues. So when it's Duncan Hunter involved in a corruption scandal, then it's Representative Duncan Hunter of California, Republican, involved in corruption. And then when it is a Democrat, when it's Senator Bob Menendez from New Jersey, and there are allegations made about him of sexual abuse, for example, or corruption, when instead of it saying allegations of corruption made about Senator Bob Menendez, it's conservatives pounce on allegations. Like, why is that news? I'm so confused as to why that's even news. Why isn't news how conservatives react to an allegation of sexual abuse cover-up by the Pope? Isn't the news the sexual abuse cover-up by the Pope? It's such an insane statement. You'd never see that in reverse. You would never see liberals pounce as allegations of Trump corruption mount, because then that puts the onus on liberals to explain why they are pouncing. Instead, it's allegations of Trump corruption mount. But this is how the New York Times covers the issue. And here is the way that they have decided to cover this. Quote, since the start of his papacy, Francis has infuriated Catholic traditionalists as he tries to nurture a more welcoming church and shifted away from culture war issues, whether abortion or homosexuality. Who am I to judge, the Pope famously said when asked about gay priests. That is the first paragraph of a story about a Pope who is alleged to have covered up sexual abuse and molestation inside the church. The first paragraph is about what a great guy Pope Francis is for not paying attention to social issues like abortion and homosexuality. Is it possible that the Pope's reason for ignoring some of those issues is specifically because he does want to focus on those quote-unquote bigger issues the left likes, and he knows the media will help cover for him? That's not even the worst of the New York Times article. We'll get to that in just a second. So the New York Times article continues. It says, just how angry his political and doctrinal enemies are became clear this weekend when a caustic letter published by the Vatican's former top diplomat in the United States blamed a homosexual current in the Vatican hierarchy for sexual abuse. It called for Francis's resignation, accusing him of covering up for a disgraced cardinal, Theodore E. McCarrick. Okay, that's an insane statement. How the focus is on how angry they are? Oh, wow, look at these people. What's making them... You mad, bro? That the Pope was covering for sexual abuse, allegedly? Yes, I'm angry. Yes, Vigano was angry. Yes, conservatives inside the church and liberals inside. Why is this a partisan issue? Why is the Pope covering for sexual abuse a partisan issue? By the way, it wouldn't be a partisan issue if the Pope's name were Benedict. If the Pope's name were John Paul II. If it were John Paul II, there would not be any of this blowback from the New York Times, because then it would be targeting a conservative Pope. But because we are targeting a Pope who's liberalizing on a bunch of issues the New York Times likes, then it's all about conservatives pounce. With the letter, reports the New York Times, released in the middle of the Pope's visit to Ireland, an ideologically motivated opposition has weaponized the church's sex abuse crisis to threaten not only Francis' agenda, but his entire papacy. Weaponized? Now, this is a word that the New York Times is using a lot lately. So we've heard from the New York Times that conservatives are weaponizing the First Amendment. That conservatives are, using the free speech part of the First Amendment in order to push their view. Ooh, weaponizing the First Amendment. So the issue isn't that the left wants to shut down the First Amendment. The issue is that the right is, quote unquote, weaponizing the First Amendment. Now the issue isn't that conservatives are trying to stop sexual abuse inside the Vatican. No, now the issue is that they are weaponizing sexual abuse inside the Vatican. It seems to me that if you were going to worry about weaponizing sexual abuse, maybe you ought to start with a Vatican hierarchy that looked the other way and put abusive priests back in positions to abuse more children. Would that not be weaponizing sexual assault against innocent people? It's not weaponizing sexual assault to accuse people of covering up sexual assault. That's not weaponizing anything. That's called telling the truth. Okay, but what's the New York Times' real agenda? It's the next sentence. At the very least, it has returned the issue of homosexuality in the Roman Catholic Church, which many conservatives are convinced lies behind the abuse crisis, to the center of the debate. Well, this is really where the New York Times gets concerned. What the New York Times is deeply concerned about is that there's going to be a lot of talk about homosexuality within the church, and we can't allow that. We can't allow that. Now, what's weird about this is that homosexuality is banned by the Catholic Church. At least homosexual activity is. And the toleration of homosexual activity inside the Catholic Church is a violation of Catholic canon law and has been since the inception of the Catholic Church. There's a 3,500-year tradition in Judeo-Christian religion of banning homosexual activity, or at least opposing homosexual activity. It's pretty clear here that what the New York Times really wants is for the Catholic Church to ignore the fact that there's a violation of Catholic canon law going on inside high levels of the priesthood. The New York Times says Vatican intrigues and power struggles are nothing new, but they usually remain within the medieval walls or fly over the heads of the Catholic faithful around the globe. This battle, however, is being waged in an exceptionally open and brutal manner. This is an objective news story. It's exceptionally open and brutal. How about the media uncovering all these sex abuse scandals in the first place? Was that exceptionally open and brutal, or was that called good reporting that they were supposed to do? But it's exceptionally open and brutal when it turns out that this sort of thing ties into a homosexual subculture within the church. When the two correlate, and again, that doesn't mean causation, but when the two correlate, then the New York Times is more interested in protecting the homosexual subculture of the church than in protecting children. Okay, that is what is going on here. What is going on is that the New York Times and folks in the press are more interested in protecting their social agenda within the church than with protecting children. Because if it comes down to a choice between targeting people like McCarrick, who apparently was having sex with seminarians, and protecting children that McCarrick was also abusing, they would prefer to preserve McCarrick at the cost of the children. That's all I can take away from these press reports. These accusations in the letter remain unsubstantiated, says the New York Times. Really, would they treat them as unsubstantiated if they were against Pope Benedict? Or would it be on the front page of every newspaper ever? Asked Sunday night about their validity, Francis said he would not dignify them with a response, which is, of course, a non-response. That is dignifying them with a response. If I ask you if you sexually abuse children, and I have a credible allegation from people who know you, and you say, I'm not going to dignify that with a response, or I don't know, I'm not going to say yes, I'm not going to say no, I think it's fair to say that we should have some serious follow-up questions. They are serious, says the New York Times. The Pope's vague answer has only heightened public interest, particularly in the core accusation that he was told about Mr. McCarrick's history of sexual relations with seminarians and did nothing about it. But Francis's non-answer is in keeping with his reluctance to give oxygen to a small, if influential and noisy, group of conservative prelates and writers aligned with the author of the letter. So it's all a political war. That's all this is. It's just a political war. And then I'm supposed to wonder that people on the right don't trust the media when they're willing to cover for a pope who may indeed be covering up for sexual abuse of children and seminarians because they like the Pope's agenda? Fully insane. And that's not the limit of how far the media went in the last couple of days on a variety of issues. We'll get into their insane defense of Antifa in just a second. But first, let's talk about your investments. So Robinhood is an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, cryptocurrencies, all commission-free. They are striving to make financial services work for everyone, not just for wealthy folks. So if you're into trading, you ought to be looking at Robinhood because there is no commission fee. Other brokerages charge up to $10 for every trade. Robinhood doesn't charge commission fees. You trade the stocks and you keep all your profits. And it's easy to understand because they use these great charts, market data. You can place a trade in just 4 taps on your smartphone. I've looked at Robinhood. I've seen how easy, user-friendly it is. My assistant uses Robinhood on a regular basis. She's into the trading. Go check it out right now. Robinhood's web platform also lets you view stock collections like 100 most popular, entertainment, social media. You can have curated categories like female CEOs, analyst ratings of buy, hold, sell for every single stock. And you can learn how to invest as you build your portfolio. So the best way to learn to invest is to actually start investing. Go check it out right now. Robinhood is giving listeners a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help build that portfolio. Sign up at shapiro.robinhood.com. That's shapiro.robinhood.com. When you use that shapiro.robinhood.com website, then you get a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint. Go check it out right now. Shapiro.robinhood.com. It's the best way to learn to trade and can do so without them ripping you off on the commissions. Go check it out right now. Shapiro.robinhood.com. An easier, more user-friendly way to trade. Okay, so it wasn't just that the media are now covering for the Pope because they think that climate change is more important than the abuse of children, or because they think that the promotion of homosexuality within the church is more important than the abuse of children. No, they are now covering for the media because they believe that the media are now covering not just for the Pope, they are also covering for groups like Antifa. So the folks over at CNN seem to have some bizarre love for Antifa. We've already seen Chris Cuomo in the past, the less smart or more smart of the Cuomo brothers, depending on which day it is. We've already seen him defend Antifa. Don Lemon last night on CNN defended Antifa as well. Antifa, you will recall, is a group of people who call themselves anti-fascist, but then they dress up in masks and beat the crap out of people, which is actually fascist. Here's Don Lemon defending them.
It says it right in the name, Antifa, anti-fascism, which is what they were there fighting. Listen, there's, no organization is perfect. There was some violence. No one condones the violence, but there were different reasons for Antifa and for these neo-Nazis to be there. One, racist fascists. The other group fighting racist fascists. There's a distinction there.
Okay, that's insane. I love that he says it's right there in the name. Right, and the name Affordable Care Act is right there in the name, but it didn't make it affordable or care. And every act is named after something. It doesn't mean that it actually is that thing. There are a bunch of... The People's Republic of North Korea is not actually a republic. The USSR, the Union of Soviet Republics, that's not actually it was not actually a union of Soviet republics. It was actually a dictatorship from the top, run by a one-party state. So no, I love that. I love that he says Antifa it's anti-fascist. Therefore, not every group is perfect. Well, I can say this: groups that I belong to don't go out in masks with clubs and beat the living crap out of people, break ATMs, and shatter windows. That's actually not the groups that I'm a part of, nor the groups that I support. And when those groups do those things, I disassociate from those groups because as far as I'm aware, I've never been a member of any of those groups or backed any of those groups. I love that the Tea Party were terrorists, according to the left, but Antifa, who legitimately require 600 police officers to be prevented from shutting down a speech I'm doing in Berkeley. Those people are just, it's just a few bad apples who just always seem to come to the forefront every time Antifa does any sort of activity. Weird how that works. The same CNN that labels the Tea Party a bunch of terrible, awful, violent people, when it's really a bunch of 60-year-old dudes with "Don't Tread on Me" flags. Clearly, that's the threat, not Antifa. I can't imagine why we don't trust the media. I love this. Alison Camerata did an interview with John Sununu. John Sununu is former governor of New Hampshire, very close friends with John McCain. And this demonstrates, again, why folks don't trust the media. So John Sununu doesn't trust the media, and he doesn't trust some of the headlines that come out from the Washington Post or CNN, which he has every right not to do. And Alison Camerata brings him on, supposedly to talk about the death of his very close friend John McCain, and instead she starts to grill him about President Trump, because the only thing he's allowed to say on CNN is that President Trump is garbage, even when he's there just to talk about John McCain. And folks don't trust CNN. Shocker, shocker.
You come on CNN, and we appreciate you coming on CNN, and we appreciate your take on it. But I don't appreciate you denigrating our reporting. I think that we have excellent reporters here. But are you saying that you don't want to believe that? You don't want to believe that President Trump would do that about John McCain?
I'm saying that I don't want to comment on a report that I haven't satisfied myself is correct.
Okay, and that's the way CNN's going to approach this. Any questions about CNN are off the table. By the way, CNN analyst Jeffrey Toobin yesterday claimed that any criticism of Antifa was Donald Trump's appeal to racism. Okay, Antifa is whiter than the local branch of the KKK. I mean, Antifa is a bunch of white people. Every time there are a bunch of arrested in Antifa rally, it is always a bunch of white people. So that's pretty astonishing stuff from the media, all of which has driven a lot of the support for President Trump's rips on the media. So this was actually quite funny. Yesterday, President Trump was meeting with the head of FIFA in FIFA? It's a soccer association. FIFA, I don't care. I don't really care. Thanks for the correction, Alex. Don't care. Okay, but the president was meeting with the head of FIFA McFIFA, the head of the Soccer Association, and he actually turns to the press and gives them a red card, which is actually pretty funny.
Yellow card is a warning, right? And when you want to kick out someone,
So he took the red card and he started trying to throw them at the members of the press because he doesn't like the members of the press. I think that Trump and the right are well justified in their dislike of a dishonest press that reports issues like Antifa and the Catholic Church the way that they do. Also, the media's malfeasance here drives a lot of fear, and that fear drives bad politics. So yesterday, President Trump was excoriated for statements that he made to members of the evangelical community. As per NBC News, President Trump was talking to a bunch of evangelical leaders at the White House, and he said the level of hatred, the level of anger is unbelievable. Part of it is because of some of the things I've done for you and for me and for my family, but I've done them. This November 6th election is very much a referendum on not only me, it's a referendum on your religion, it's a referendum on free speech and the First Amendment. He said if the GOP loses, they will overturn everything that we've done, and they'll do it quickly and violently. And violently, there's violence. When you look at Antifa and you look at some of these groups, these are violent people. Well, I disagree that we're going to look at a violent overturning from the bottom up of the First Amendment. What I do see from the left is that level of anger and level of hatred directed at religious people, and it's very real, unless that religious person happens to be somebody that folks on the left believe is going to overturn the priorities of conservatives. If it's Pope Francis, then he has to be praised to the skies and protected even if he is covering up for sexual abuse. If it is an actual conservative, then they will attack that conservative up and down. So I think that the left ignores its own role in driving the polarization. They like to pretend that Donald Trump, the universe began with Donald Trump, with the birth of Donald Trump. The coverage of the press in other areas of human life, including the coverage of the church scandal or Antifa, demonstrates that reactionary politics is alive and well on both sides. I think that this fight was started by the left. I don't like how the right has responded to the left, but that doesn't mean that the left didn't start this fight and that the right doesn't have pretty good reason to worry about the excesses of the left if the left should ever take power. Speaking of the excesses of the left, I mean, you wonder why we don't trust folks on the left to have power. Maybe it's because they seriously write articles like this. I love this one. It's so astonishing. It's from Daisy Alioto over at Vox.com. So, full disclosure, I have a couple of people with whom I am friendly at Vox.com, but overall, Vox is a steaming pile of human debris. It is just an awful, awful website, and they print garbage pieces on a regular basis. And in just a second, I'm going to give you the latest of the garbage pieces. But first, let's talk about you exercising your Second Amendment rights. Now, I'm not just talking about you going hunting or going sport shooting or something like that. I'm talking about the real reason that the founders wanted you to have a gun, which is to protect your family, protect your home, protect your community, and protect your country. Well, the folks who care the most about that are the folks over at Bravo Company Manufacturing. It was started in a garage by a Marine vet more than 2 decades ago to build a professional-grade product that actually meets combat standards. BCM believes the same level of protection should be provided to every American, regardless of whether you're a private citizen or a professional. If you have to protect yourself, you need a gun that works. BCM is not a sporting arms company. They design, engineer, and manufacture life-saving equipment, and they assume that each rifle leaving their shop will be used in a life or death situation by a responsible citizen, law enforcement officer, or soldier overseas. Every component of a BCM rifle is hand-assembled and tested by Americans to a life-saving standard. Of course, they apply by every applicable law, and they understand that if the time comes somebody's in your house, you're going to need a gun that works. BCM feels a moral responsibility as Americans to provide tools that will not fail the user when we're not just talking about a paper target. It's somebody coming to do you harm. To learn more about Bravo Company Manufacturing, head on over to BravoCompanyMFG.com. You can discover more about their products, special offers, and upcoming news. That's BravoCompanyMFG.com. Again, go check them out. Their videos are really astonishing and quite cool. Go check them out at YouTube.com/BravoCompanyUSA. That's BravoCompanyMFG.com or YouTube.com/BravoCompanyUSA. These are folks who know why we need guns and put together exactly the kind of firearms that you need if you got to protect yourself. BravoCompanyMFG.com. Go check them out right now. Okay, in just a second, I've talked a lot about media ridiculousness today, but this one takes the cake. We'll get to that in just a second. $9.99 a month gets you a subscription to Daily Wire. The rest of this show live, the rest of Klavan's show live, the rest of Knowles' show live, if that's something you're into. Plus, with the annual subscription, you get this. The very greatest in all beverage vessels, the leftist tears hot or cold tumbler. Refreshing to both mind and spirit, as well as body. You can check that out right now with your annual subscription. It's cheaper than the monthly, so go check that out. Also, when you subscribe over at YouTube or iTunes, you get access to our Sunday special. This week, our Sunday special features one of my favorite authors, Professor Edward Feser. Professor Feser is the author of 5 Proofs of God's Existence and a variety of other philosophical books, really good philosopher, and we talk about his logical, secularly based proofs of God's existence and what we lack in a society that doesn't believe in God anymore. Professor Ed Fazer, here's a little bit of what we talked about.
Hi, I'm Edward Fazer, the author of 5 Proofs of the Existence of God. And this Sunday on the Ben Shapiro Show Sunday Special, we'll be talking about the book and about the traditional arguments for the existence of God.
Okay, and it is totally worthwhile. It is deep stuff. I mean, get ready. I mean, get your scuba gear ready because we go deep on this particular topic. It's not the easiest stuff, but it is, I think, some of the most informative stuff we've ever done on the Sunday Special. So go check that out right now. We're the largest, fastest growing conservative podcast in the nation.
Right now. So here's what you need to know. Hey, Bill O'Reilly here. Here's the truth about the national press and the radical left. They don't like America as it stands right now. So here's what you need to know. You're not getting accurate, fair information that you need to make decisions that impact your family. Patriotic Americans still believe in fair play, and so do we. So please stop by the No Spin News exclusively on BillO'Reilly.com beginning every night at 7 p.m. Eastern. We tackle the issues head on, discuss real facts, and are always looking out for you.
crucial detail that 100 priests abused 1,000 children. Then, over the weekend, the Vatican's former ambassador to the U.S. wrote a letter alleging that Pope Francis knew about sex abuse charges against former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, but that Francis covered up the allegations for years. McCarrick resigned in June after allegations of sexual abuses of a minor and 3 other incidents of sexual misconduct with adults. The 11-page letter from the former Vatican ambassador calls on Pope Francis to resign. Look, I'm not Catholic. I've never been Catholic. I know a lot of good people who are Catholic, but that's about my closest connection to the church. But today we're going to ask a very uncomfortable question. Has the coverage of this scandal been accurate? In some ways, it's been too generous. Namely, the number of 1,000 children abused is almost definitely too low. As the report states, we were given the job of investigating child sex abuse in 6 dioceses. These 6 dioceses account for 54 of Pennsylvania's 67 counties. They didn't even look at 13 entire counties, and they found 1,000 kids. And that's not all. We believe that the real number of children whose records were lost or who were afraid to ever come forward is in the thousands. And it wasn't just the molestation, it was how the church handled it. After one priest admitted the quote you're going to see on the screen right here, which I refuse to read because I know they'll pull it out of context and use it against me, the diocese concluded that, quote, the experience will not necessarily be a horrendous trauma for the victim. The priest was left in unrestricted ministry for several more years despite his own confession. That might not be all that surprising. We all knew it was really bad, but we needed to look deeper. Let's start with a statement of fact. What did we know before this latest scandal? For a long time, the Catholic Church was populated by way too many clergy members who were sexually assaulting children. It was far too widespread, and the way the church handled the allegations was a gigantic dumpster fire. This started to come to light in 2002, most famously through the reporting of the Boston Globe. They even made a movie about it called Spotlight.
Why are we hesitating? Barron told us to get law. This is law.
Barron told us to get the system. We need the full scope. That's the only thing that will put an end to this.
Then let's take it up to Ben, let him decide.
We'll take it to Ben when I say it's time.
It's time, Robbie. It's time. They knew, and they let it happen. 2 kids. Okay? It could have been you. It could have been me. It could have been any of us. We got to nail these scumbags. We got to show people that nobody can get away with this. Not a priest or a cardinal or a freaking pope.
Movies about journalism are always more exciting than journalism. Unsurprisingly, Spotlight won Best Picture because this is what happens when you expose something evil in a church. They make a movie about you that wins lots and lots and lots of awards. The movie came out in 2015, 2 years before Chappaquiddick, a movie that took so long to get made that Ted Kennedy actually died of old age before they made it. The actress who played Mary Jo Kopechne had no recollection of the incident because she wasn't born until 14 years afterwards. She also seems to be Hollywood's go-to girl when you need to get someone killed by a corrupt politician, but that's another story. It's not possible to overstate how disturbing the scandal is. It shakes to the core the foundational institution that millions of Americans look for guidance, leadership, and safe harbor. The fact that so many at the church exploited that trust is as despicable as it gets. We knew that. Now the church would like us to believe, however, that since 2002, they have taken it seriously. They have addressed it in some way, and they've tried to turn it around. Then this report lands like an atomic bomb, completely destroying the church's narrative. But what does this new report really tell us? This is the picture that the media has painted.
What's happening in the Catholic Church this week out of Pennsylvania is something that is going to have reverberations here. Pennsylvania grand jury report released this week identified more than 1,000 child victims of more than 300 abusive Catholic priests across the state of, that's just one state of Pennsylvania. This is in 2018. Never mind what we thought they made movies about in 2002 and things like that.
What appears to be the largest abuse scandal to shake the American Catholic Church yet.
After a 2-year investigation, a Pennsylvania grand jury today alleged decades of abuse of children by more than 300 men described as predator priests.
Today in Dublin, Pope Francis got an earful about the church's response to the sexual abuse crisis. Some of the signs there in the crowd clearly not meant to welcome him.
More than 1,000 children were sexually abused by clergy, and the report finds the Catholic Church leaders actively protected and covered up for more than 300 predator priests.
Catholics around the world are processing a stunning report out of Pennsylvania detailing horrific sexual abuses of children by hundreds of priests across the state of Pennsylvania.
And this coverage was furthered emotionally by a video put out by the Pennsylvania Attorney General. Watch.
Thanks to Father Royer, he took that away from me.
I mean, it's affected my life so much.
This is a lifelong issue with survivors.
They have to be accountable, the church, for what they did.
What these people went through is as close to unforgivable as Christianity allows.